Kia ora and welcome back to part two of my philosophy. I'm really looking forward to sharing my knowledge with you and my learning about what I've learned in Domain 4, 5 and 6. So I'll just get straight into it. Domain 4 was about interprofessional practice, community of learning and evidence-based practice. So I will just come over to my Mawhai. So you can see here that within Domain 4 I started off actually with only one bar of learning, so you can see that I actually wasn't that confident around that content. However, it may have been a slight misjudgment because as I went through the literature, I was aware that even though I didn't know it was called Learning to, From, With and About, I had actually been doing that, and that actually my motives when working within a special school were good, and that I am quite a collaborative practitioner, as I had to work with speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, physios, residential care workers, diabetes nurses, epilepsy specialists. So yes, it was great because I realised that I did actually have some background in that, but I just needed to layer the papers and the evidence over top of that. So that was quite good. I'll just flick back over to my diagrams. So interprofessional practice for me, the main learning was that I needed to make sure that I had provided a shared understanding of my role to other people, and as I'm a resource teacher in Vision, it made me realise that actually do the people I work with in the schools understand the nature of my role and the boundaries of that role, and would that make a difference to my learners, or would that make our relationship easier? And of course the answer is yes, because I personally like to know my boundaries when I'm in a job, or I like to know what the job outline is so that I can have clear pathways for gaining knowledge and providing solutions. So that's what I've implemented. I explained to the teachers my role, and also found some information on our main drive that outlines our role, and have shared that with the teachers I work with. So some of them didn't realise that actually they could be inviting me to IEPs for students that I'm only moderately funded for. So that has made quite a big difference to our relationship. Kia ora, and the next part of Domain 4 that was of quite important learning to me was learning about the social artists within a community of practice, and I'm really interested in leadership characteristics, and within the paper that Etienne Wenger writes, the social artist really is a leader, like someone that is able to inspire, motivate, bring awareness to the group around insights of really good practice, but they're able to support and encourage, and it's really hard to describe. Like, he talks about a social artist as a real artist, that they have a passion for creating, and in this way a social artist create teams of people that are passionate around the same things. So it was really great for me to identify that in fact I did belong to many communities of practice, and the ones in particular were related to the teams that are around each of my individual learners. And the main learning I got from this was actually how to increase the community aspect. So how can I actually increase the learning that we do together within all the different interprofessionals, families, medical people that are within this team. And that was really important to me, because sometimes you can have these moments where you feel, okay, something's not happening within this team what can I do to get it going? And the paper outlines exactly what you need to do to get it going and how you can create positive interactions. And I think, the communities of practice that I identified that really seem to have that buzz about learning, and where our learning all works together for a better outcome for the student, is when the domain, we're all quite passionate about the domain, and we're all quite focused on the solutions for that student. So yeah, I'm really interested in the social artist idea of a social artist, as I would like to develop those qualities within myself. And then finally, it was evidence-based practice. So when I initially started, I actually didn't know that evidence-based practice involved the 3 areas. I thought it was actually just one. I thought evidence-based practice just meant using the literature. So it was wonderful for me to learn that actually it was a more holistic base, that it actually included the whānau, again, them as first teachers recognised within blends, and myself, my knowledge and my skill that I've learned not only from teaching but also from other areas in my life, and how when combined with research that can create really amazing programs for our learners. So the key learning that I got from that was actually it's the bigger picture, so it's involving the family, but also if I am putting into place a strategy or a program, then I do really need to make sure that I have the evidence behind it, so I can explain that to someone. If someone asks me, oh, well, why are you doing this with this student? And I can say, well, actually, in this paper, it suggests that you do this, this, and this, and this is, the research has said that this is one of the best ways to do it. So that has actually boosted my confidence when interacting with other people, because you can get challenged quite a lot in the area of special needs, and you need to be able to say why you're doing something. So that was really good. Kia ora, and I'll just continue on with the Domain 5. So this is in the area of assessment and assistive technology. Let's have a look at my mawhai. So in Domain 5, I felt that I had a level of 3 out of 10 in this area previously. I guess that was because I'd done quite a lot of assessment at the special schools that I had been working in. This was around speech and language programs, sensory observations, sensory, I guess testing's not necessarily the right word, but it was just trying to figure out what sensory sensitivity some of my students had. And so, yes, there was some learning, 2 bars of learning within this domain. I think I'll explain further as I come over to my pictures about the key areas of that learning. So one of the parts of it was I actually interviewed a colleague about her assistive practices. She was an SLT, and I had a little bit of an agenda beforehand. For some reason, I was like, okay, right, she's gonna tell me the different communication and development processes that she goes through when she meets students, and she'll have this test and this test and this test. And I was like, now I want to know what that test's about, because I want to be able to identify that in the different students. And it was really interesting, because on the phone call she simply said, oh, so I start with least intrusive practice, it's child based, I will read through the notes, and then I will I'll do some observations, I'll talk to the family, I'll talk to the teachers, and so there really wasn't any hard and fast testing. And I was quite surprised, and I said, oh, well, don't you use this, or don't you use this test? And she said, no, we don't really need to do that in New Zealand. Maybe if we're in America, we'd do that, because with the funding, it needs to be really shown up in terms of your assessment. She said, look, I might do something for an application to the ministry for like Oars funding, but she said in terms of the student that we were talking about, he already had Oars funding. He's a child with complex needs in nature, and she said there would be no point in identifying, like doing a test, as she called, for a test's sake. So yeah, that to me that was quite a revelation, that observation, discussions with parents, discussions with teachers was a valid form of assessment. And that took me to look at the paper by Shepherd, the Shepherd paper that I was just talking about is really the backbone of my philosophy for assessment practice. So that means that if I am doing assessment, it needs to come from the cognitive and constructivist learning theories. So therefore, learning happens through social and culturally appropriate forms. Therefore, collaborative learning is so important, and that also relates to Wigner's theory. So classroom assessment is really less high-risk testing at the end of the term, and is actually informed through next steps practice on a continual basis. And it's formative. It can be based on observations and discussions from parents, and authentic learning, which takes me on to another key document that is important for me with assessment, which is narrative assessment. I didn't have hardly any idea of narrative assessment before this course, and now I absolutely love it. I've still got quite a lot to learn, but I love it how it makes my students' learning absolutely visible, and gives an authenticity to what they are learning, and authenticity to the program. Learning doesn't have to happen in massive steps, and it can happen in little steps, but it's still learning. So I'm really grateful for that chapter, particularly in Domain 5. There was heaps of amazing resources, and also I just put the Blends logo in here too, because within this domain I did an FVA and learnt a lot about that process too, with a colleague, and all the nuances and steps it takes to provide a thorough and highly observant FVA. I'm just running out of time, so I want to move on. So I just want to briefly talk about the Gibbs reflective cycle. This was wonderful to my practice, as previously I had been told that I was quite a reflective person, yet I felt that I wasn't able to put that into words, and I wasn't specific enough when maybe another teacher challenged me, or they would ask me to reflect on an incident. Whereas now I feel quite confident in going through the cycle, and particularly the things before the analysis, because I feel like I can analyse things quite well, but I needed to pinpoint what were the key things that I needed to analyse first. So that's wonderful to have into my kitty. And then finally, the ethical dilemma was actually my favourite part of this whole course, because I really want to be a leader in education, and I feel that that's one of the key skills that you need to have, is to be able to recognise between a moral dilemma and an ethical dilemma, as Paul and Kidder talk about in their papers. So that was amazing learning for me, and quite a few things happened that unfortunately I don't have time to explain within this recording, but I would just like to leave you with this whakatauki, because it's about the people. So, hei tangata, hei tangata, hei tangata. It is the people, the people, the people. So kia ora, and I hope you enjoyed learning about my philosophy as much as I enjoyed recording it. Ka kite.